This programming is sponsored by Rice University's Master of Liberal Studies, a degree for working adults designed to sharpen critical thinking, develop in-depth research skills, and engage with a community of diverse, passionate learners. More at mls.rice.edu.
Intel claims the system is 96% accurate and can work on all kinds of deepfakes. So we decided to test it out ourselves with Ilke at Intel's offices in Silicon Valley. We got a number of deepfakes and real videos of Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Then we put them through the system one by one.
Liability protections for companies are more important than individual financial relief for teachers or sanitation workers.
So in the beginning, when it sees like very little, it may say that, okay, is this a PPG? It looks real. And then it accumulates and it has it as fake. It finds it with, at the end, 84% accuracy fake.
That was correct.
Today, as the sitting president in the White House, I still believe that marriage should be between a man and a woman. I'm a traditionalist, okay? Really?
Fake with 66% accuracy.
This is fake.
Yay. But it took time for it to get, because I think the overall face resolution is low in this one too. So I think that is also affecting that, you know.
The system was good at finding fakes, but not so good at working out that a video was real, kind of important.
I'd be working with the leaders of Congress now, today.
I think fake.
Same fake. That is actually real.
Really?
That's a real one.
Okay, so then that means like the PPG signals are broken at some point. So, okay.
Here's a problem with the system. It doesn't analyze for audio yet, so often videos that seemed fairly obviously real were still labeled as fake. Matt Groh at MIT thinks the tech is interesting, but wants more information around its effectiveness.
I would want to see a lot of testing done by third parties to audit the effectiveness and accuracy of these algorithms. And I will mention that I don't doubt the stats that they listed in their initial evaluation. But what I do doubt is whether these stats are relevant to real-world contexts.
Deepfakes are going to become more and more of a problem. Perhaps Fake Catcher will be part of the mix of tools people use to catch them, but it's still by no means the finished article.
That report by James Clayton.
For decades, we have been hearing about how American soccer is turning the corner, and now Messi Mania has arrived.
Never did I think we'd have 30 teams that would sign the biggest, most famous player in the world.
I'm Scott Detrow. The commissioner of Major League Soccer talks the past and future of soccer in the States. That's on All Things Considered from NPR News.
.4 p.m. on News 88.7.
Life is complicated enough. Why worry about what to do with that extra car? Skip the cost of maintenance, registration, insurance, storage, or even selling it to someone. Instead, donate that car, truck, or even classic car to Houston Public Media. Not only will you help sustain the PBS, NPR, and local programming you love, but you could qualify for a nice tax deduction. We'll handle all the details. Just go to houstonpublicmedia.org/vehicle, fill out the form, and we'll take it from there.
A reminder of our top story this hour. Voting has ended in the snap elections in Spain, with surveys indicating the Conservative People's Party will gain seats but fall short of a majority. The BBC's Guy Hedgeko told us that neither right nor left groupings appear to have enough to form a coalition.
It still looks like being pretty much neck and neck between the two main parties, the Conservative People's Party and the Socialist Party. They're pretty much neck and neck. But it looks very unlikely that the Conservatives are going to be able to form a majority, even if they team up with the far-right Vox party.
Also in this hour, the Israeli President Isaac Herzog has held an emergency meeting with the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, amidst the showdown between protesters and the government over its attempts to limit judicial powers. This is Julian Marshall with NewsHour, live from the BBC in London. A senior Indian official has arrived in the northeastern state of Manipur, saying she wants to meet survivors of sexual assault during recent ethnic violence and ensure they're getting help. The visit by Swati Maliwal, head of the Women's Commission for Delhi, comes as Manipur's Kuki tribal minority accuse the state and national governing party, the BJP, of downplaying their persecution at the hands of the Maitai majority. In new evidence, a young man has recounted how his 80-year-old grandmother was locked into her home and burned alive in May, and an 18-year-old was described being handed over by other women to a gang who raped her. The BBC's Divya Arya has managed to get into the state and sent us this report.
Shops are shut in this part of Manipur's capital city, Imphal, because another violent incident was reported here. This road leads to the airport, so you do see some vehicles going from here, but mostly residents in this area are staying indoors, stepping out only if they need some essentials. Now, what really strikes you when you come to Manipur is that the city and the state has seen no internet for more than 2.5 months now. So while some areas might be returning to normalcy, it is really hard to communicate and resume normal life. And despite the fact that there is no internet, when we traveled around the state, we found that the video that shows 2 women being disrobed, paraded naked, and then sexually assaulted was still being shared widely, and people would just take out their phones and show that video to us. It has fueled more anger, despair, and discontent amongst both communities. Thousands are still displaced and in relief camps, unable to go back to their homes after they were set on fire in the violence that happened in the month of May. While there have been arrests after the video came out and there has been condemnation from both communities, especially spearheaded by women, everybody's been pointing out that the state government and the central government hasn't done enough, that the Prime Minister has spoken, but spoken too little and too late. Until there is a concerted effort to find a political resolution to the dispute, sporadic incidents of violence can continue. We've heard of reports of firing across the border overnight. Curfew is clamped every evening, and it will be very difficult for people to go back from relief camps and even think of rebuilding their lives.
That was Divya Arya in the Indian state of Manipur. And let's return to our top stories. Spain, where early results indicate a tight finish between the Conservatives and the Socialists. As we heard from our correspondent in Madrid at the start of the programme, they're running neck and neck, and it's beginning to look as if there'll be no left-wing or right-wing majority. I'm joined now from Madrid by Aitor Hernandez Morales, a Spanish journalist from the Politico News website. And Aitor, what are the latest results?
It is a truly remarkable turnaround. All the polls indicated that the Popular Party would be very, very near to governing, but what we're seeing right now is that it appears to have underperformed in a very significant manner. So right now, the scenario is, as you mentioned, a parliament where no party has a clear majority. That said, it would appear that the left-wing Socialist Party has a clear path to government. It would appear that they would be able to form a governing coalition with the left-wing Sumar Party that would bring it up to over 150 seats. They need 176 to reach the absolute majority, and it's possible that they can cover and cobble together an agreement with regional parties in Spain. So it is possible that Pedro Sanchez will remain Spain's prime minister.
And you were expecting, Aitor, to be talking about something very different tonight, weren't you? The People's Party reaching out to Vox to form a coalition government. So what's happened?
Well, I have to caution that we're at 90% of the recount. So we've still got a little bit to go, and there are some regions of Spain that have not yet made significant advances in the recount. So one of them is Madrid, is still in the process. But right now, it looks unlikely that the Popular Party and the far-right Vox Party will make it to that magic 176 seat number to control the parliament. If that's the case and they don't get to that point, it is very difficult for the Popular Party to reach enough support to be able to govern, simply because its partnership with the far-right Vox Party is so toxic for the rest of the parties represented in the Spanish parliament. It's a truly incredible turnaround, considering we had projected, almost everyone had projected, that the Popular Party and Vox would be able to form a government. And the last projections, which were actually released at 8 o'clock this evening, basically guaranteed that they would be able to form a government. So it's a truly remarkable moment in Spain.
Do you think it was those very projections of the possibility of a coalition government involving Vox that maybe turned voters towards the socialists?
It's possible. We've definitely seen a turnout was strong today, despite the fact that these elections are taking place in the middle of a vacation. Over a quarter of Spaniards are on holiday, and there's a heat wave hitting Spain, so that the temperatures have been pretty unbearable. But people turn out to vote, and it is possible that there were the fears of the far right. It's also just been a terrible week for the Popular Party's candidate. Earlier this week, he was involved in some very unpleasant moments. First, debating with the national television service. He got into a fierce debate with a journalist there who decided to fact-check him when he said some incorrect statements, and that turned into a tense back and forth. And then later on, the Spanish media focused once again on very problematic pictures that he has from the 1990s, where he was photographed on a yacht with a Galician drug trafficker. And he was not able to explain what his relationship was with this person. And that certainly damaged his image during this final week of the campaign.
Well, as you say, the results are incomplete. But what does it look like at the moment? Horse trading or maybe another election?
Both are possible. Both are absolutely possible. A lot of it may actually depend on the Catalan members of parliament, and the relationships with them and the rest of the Spanish parties are always very complicated. But certainly, yes, there will be a lot of horse trading. In the first vote in parliament, it's a matter of reaching that absolute majority with 176. Then there will be a second vote in which the candidate to be prime minister needs to secure more yeas than nays. That sounds like simple math, but you're allowed to abstain. So if Pedro Sanchez decides to be that candidate and he is convinced that he has sufficient support, he will simply have to make sure that he has more MPs voting in favor of him remaining prime minister rather than more voting against.
Aitor, look, very many thanks for that. That was Aitor Hernandez Morales, a Spanish journalist from the Politico News website, speaking there from Madrid. And that's it from this edition of News Hour. From me, Julian Marshall, and the rest of the team in London, goodbye.
Hi, I'm Camille Nelson, your member relations specialist. If you are a monthly Always member and need to update your donation payment method, you can go online to houstonpublicmedia.org/update. Our easy online form will ensure that your information remains secure. Also, consider making the switch to EFT. You will help lower our processing cost, which puts more funding into the programming you love, trust, and rely on. Thank you.
So much information comes at us these days, we barely have time to process it. I'm Ernie Manous. On Town Square, we work to keep you better informed and invite you into the conversation. Call, email, or join us online.
Weekday afternoons at 3 o'clock.
Houston Public Media mourns the loss of our friend and visionary supporter, Ann Harder.
This is your NPR station, KUHF Houston, News 88.7, a service of the University of Houston.
Will there really be this next generation of athletes that have the option to play anywhere else in the world? And they say, no, I'm going to come to the MLS because I see the value that can be brought.
Messi mania comes to the U.S. Can he reshape Major League Soccer? For Sunday, July 23rd, it's All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Scott Detrow. More and more Republican-controlled states are passing restrictions on transgender medical care as more and more states where Democrats hold power protect them. How these laws are making families weigh whether it's time to move.
Our lives have been turned upside down by someone who can flippantly say, well, just let the courts decide.
And in this week's Enlighten Me, how people continue to shape our everyday lives, even long after they're gone.
I'm of the belief that one doesn't move past loss. Grief makes a home, I think, within us if we allow it to.
All that and more after these news headlines.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Janine Herbst. In Ukraine, Russian strikes overnight in Odessa left more than 20 historic buildings damaged, including a landmark cathedral in the city. One person is dead, nearly 24 are injured. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Antony Blinken says while Ukraine has reconquered half the territory that Russia initially seized in its invasion, he faces a very hard fight to win back more.
Now Ukraine is in a battle to get back more of the land that Russia seized from it. It's already taken back about 50% of what was initially seized. Now they're in a very hard fight to take back more.
Speaking there to CNN. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is recovering from an emergency heart procedure. It's the latest twist as Israel's domestic crisis surges with protests against a contentious law set to pass on Monday. NPR's Daniel Estrin has more from Tel Aviv.
Netanyahu's office says the 73-year-old prime minister is recuperating from an emergency heart pacemaker implantation and is expected to be released from the hospital Monday to attend the vote on a judicial overhaul that legal experts say would give the government some unchecked powers because it would block Israel's judiciary from being able to overturn government appointments and decisions. Many former security leaders and Mossad spy chiefs say the legislation poses a security threat, with thousands of military reservists threatening not to serve in protest. There have been rallies for and against the legislation, and Israel's President Isaac Herzog met Netanyahu at the hospital to try to broker an agreement with the opposition. The president said this is a time of emergency. Daniel Estrin, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
A wildfire in southern Washington state has exploded in size, sending residents fleeing. As NPR's Amy Held reports, the blaze has burned through structures and is threatening others.
In Klickitat County, Washington, just north of the Oregon border, officials have gone door to door telling residents to leave now. The Newell Road fire was sparked Friday, burning through grass, brush, and timber. It took less than 24 hours to reach 30,000 acres and growing, driven by hot, dry winds. Alan Leibovitz is with the state's Department of Natural Resources.
We are under red flag warning. That's firefighters in this night because the humidity is dropping precipitously, the winds are picking up, and so the fire carries extremely fast, and the fuels that it does encounter are very receptive.
The county is under a state of emergency as the fire threatens homes, farms, and a natural gas pipeline. Amy Held, NPR News.
This week, President Biden will establish a national monument honoring Emmett Till and his mother, Amy Till Mobley. Emma was the black teenager from Chicago who was tortured and killed in 1955 after being accused of whistling at a white woman. He was lynched, and his mother insisted on an open casket, which helped galvanize the civil rights movement. You're listening to NPR News. With temperatures soaring across much of the northern hemisphere, experts are warning people to be aware of any sign that they might be getting overwhelmed by the heat.
It's critical to learn to recognize the signs and symptoms of heat exhaustion early so that it doesn't progress to something more serious like heat stroke. Ollie Jay is a professor of heat and health at the University of Sydney. He says mild heat exhaustion can start with headaches or feeling lethargic.
That can be treated quite easily and quite quickly, provided the person removes themselves from that hot environment. We can cool them down.
Jay says get out of the heat and in the shade or indoors ASAP. Drink plenty of water, douse your clothes and skin, and immerse your feet in cold water if you can. Vomiting or lack of coordination can signal more serious heat exhaustion. Jay says if not treated quickly, that could progress to heat stroke, which can be fatal. Maria Godoy, NPR News.
The Organization of Islamic Cooperation has suspended the status of Sweden's special envoy over Quran burnings that sparked mass protests in a number of Muslim countries. The Islamic holy book was burned or defaced during recent public demonstrations in the Swedish capital. And an Iraqi man of Christian origin says he plans to burn the Quran in front of the Iraqi embassy in Stockholm this week. The 57-member organization says it sent a letter to Sweden's foreign minister conveying this decision. I'm Janine Herbst, NPR News in Washington.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the Lodestar Foundation, inspired by the principle that helping someone else less fortunate is a path to a happier, healthier, and more meaningful life. Learn more at lodestarfoundation.org.
stakes driving the news. That's The Daily from the New York Times, weeknights at 7 on News 88.7.
This is All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Scott Detrow.
Definitely rooting for red.
A few nights ago, producer Brianna Scott and I went to Washington, D.C.'s Navy Yard. It was hot, it was humid.
Our smells better than Chelsea. Ice cold water.
But there was a lot of excitement. Thousands of sports fans were there in this neighborhood that just a few years ago hosted the World Series. This crowd was focused on soccer and headed into the home of D.C.'s Major League Soccer team, the United, to watch the league's All-Star game. As rabid as many of the fans were about soccer, they acknowledged that here in the U.S., this kind of scene is still kind of a rarity.
America is considered the best when it comes to the majority of sports. Basketball, hockey, baseball, football, lacking in soccer, though. So
Isaac Diorio is one of the many soccer fans we spoke to as they headed into the All-Star game. A squad made up of the best players in the league was taking on one of the English Premier League's most storied clubs, Arsenal. Many of the people we spoke to were clearly avid soccer fans, like Patrick Fleming and his dad, Chris.
I think that the world community of soccer is something so special that is nothing compares to it.
Yeah, I mean, I always told them it doesn't matter where you are in the world, you can always find a game. That's soccer. There's no other sport.
Just maybe not fans of the MLS.
How often do you go to MLS games over there?
Not ever.
That's Andreas Gazal, and he's not the only person we spoke to who had never gone to an MLS game. MLS is hoping that's about to change.
Miami's number 10, America's number 10, the best number 10 in the world, Lionel Andres Messi.
Arguably soccer's greatest of all time, the GOAT, if you will, has come to play in America. Argentina native Lionel Messi walked away from Europe and turned down a monstrous contract offer in Saudi Arabia to come play for Inter Miami. Messi has been the defining soccer great of his generation, and the fans at the All-Star game were excited.
He's like LeBron James.
LeBron or like Michael
Jordan, Wayne Gretzky. Think of
Tom Brady, Michael Jordan, LeBron James of soccer, right?
Messi's arrival has many people wondering what it means for soccer in the U.S.
He means so much more than just soccer, right? He's transcended the sport.
Getting international players in the MLS just helps raise the bar for like American soccer.
And more specifically, what it means for a league that has long struggled to take that next step and break into that top tier of U.S. leagues.
Is it that bringing Messi in is going to attract more of a foreign audience to the MLS? Or is it going to turn on more Americans to keep watching soccer now that we have a worldwide star? We'll have to wait and see.
In our Sunday cover story, as MLS is about to mark its 30th anniversary, it's closer to the other American major leagues, football, baseball, hockey, and basketball, than ever before. But it still lags far behind those top European leagues. At the same time,
Number 10, La Familia, please welcome to the pitch for the first time in Jose Negro, número 10, Lionel Messi!
the MLS Messi era began Friday night, when he came off the bench for Miami in the second half of the game against Mexico's Cruz Azul. He delivered on the hype, scoring a game-winning goal in extra time. Here's the call from Apple TV.
Messi!
I think it's exciting to have really one of the biggest names in soccer history come to the U.S.
Jasmine Gars covers criminal justice and immigration for NPR. She loves soccer and Messi in particular. Jasmine is from Argentina, and last year, ahead of the World Cup, she hosted a bilingual podcast, The Last Cup, all about Messi and what he means to Argentina, really the globe.
Every corner of the world, there are kids who are wearing Messi soccer jerseys. I've gone on assignment as a reporter to Uganda, Bangladesh, and Europe, and everywhere in the world there is a child wearing a Messi jersey.
Every award or trophy you can think of, Messi has won. He scored hundreds and hundreds of goals, running around the soccer field making his opponents look silly.
Gol de Leo Messi sobre la bocina! El tercero del Barcelona! El segundo de Leo Messi!
He topped it all off last year, finally winning the World Cup.
We want him to feel that he's part of the MLS
Don Garber has been the MLS commissioner since 1999, when no one really viewed it as an actual major league like the NFL or Major League Baseball.
The league launched after the 1994 World Cup with great fanfare. World Cup was very successful in the United States. And then we went through a period in the early 2000s where we were thinking of shutting the league down, going through contracting teams.
The teams were mostly playing to small crowds in cavernous NFL stadiums. And no one watching the games was confusing the New York, New Jersey Metro Stars and other MLS squads for Real Madrid or other iconic European clubs.
And then we got a call that maybe David Beckham would like to come to Los Angeles.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct pleasure and honor to introduce to Los Angeles and the world the newest member of the LA Galaxy, Mr. David Beckham.
In 2007, Beckham was in a similar spot as Messi is now, a globally famous sports superstar.
And at that time, it was just spectacular, and the crowds were enormous, and David sort of gave us the cultural moments that MLS didn't have, that the NBA and the NFL does have, and then just became another player. Injuries and the trials and tribulations, and ultimately winning championships. And if not for David, there's no Messi. And frankly, I would say if not for David coming here in 2007, I'm not sure the league would be on the trajectory that we have been on.
The league has kept growing in the decade and a half since. Most teams play in brand new soccer-specific stadiums. Fans are filling the seats. I asked Garber about what comes next.
I've heard you talk a lot about comparing MLS to the big European soccer leagues, and I've heard you talk a lot about comparing it to the big domestic leagues and other sports in the U.S. In the long term, which is more important to you as you think about the next steps for the league to make?
It really is being part of the global conversation of international football. At the end of the day, we're competing against big established soccer football leagues that have enormous reach and fan bases, that have 100 years of history, that have got generational support. And that's the marketplace, that's the audience, particularly with a global media partner, that we're very focused on.
How do you close that gap? Because you can have as much momentum as you want, but we're talking about a moment in time where it feels like trillions of dollars are being spent at some of these big European clubs. Just the money is more than ever before. The global rights are more than ever before. It just seems to be on another stratosphere.
We're still in the earliest days of MLS, right? You think about the lifespan of a company, they look at it in generations of a 20-year period. We're still babies on that path. So we look at really what the future opportunity is. And if you think about things like our development programs, our homegrown player systems, our transfers that continue to grow in terms of our sales of international players, all of them are beginning to be part of the global conversation. And eventually being part of that family ultimately is going to lead to the kinds of opportunities like the Lionel Messi opportunity.
Last thing, I have heard you and so many other people at MLS talk about all the things you're excited about with Messi. What's the thing you're most worried about? Is there anything that you think this has to go right?
Yeah, I mean, listen, he has to get totally inculcated into the culture of being in America. And people thought we set up the stunt where he went to a public supermarket. We actually didn't, The guy wanted to go to the supermarket, right? And people down in Miami are big soccer fans, and they say, hey, that's Messi. And eventually he asked his wife for the keys to the car, and he went in the car and probably listened to the radio,
He probably wasn't doing that in Barcelona.
He probably wasn't doing that in Barcelona. So I think there's a lot of time that he's going to have to work with all the people around him and with the club just to get comfortable.
So that was Don Garber, the commissioner of Major League Soccer. And when you think about his goal of making MLS at the same level as the European soccer leagues, like the Premier League, it's clear standing outside the All-Star game in D.C. how far he has to go. There are fans streaming into the stadium to go to this match between the MLS All-Stars and Arsenal. And it feels like 90% of the people walking into the stadium are wearing red Arsenal jerseys. They're here to see the British soccer team.
I don't think it'll ever be what it is in Europe, but I don't think that means that it'll stay what it is.
Still, many MLS fans really think the American League could blow up one day, way down the line. Do you feel like MLS could ever be at that EPL level, ever be at that championship?
1000%. It's not a if, it's just a when.
Yeah, I would never say never, right? In this case, it's just the U.S. is so far behind.
Messi will help with that, and he'll be paid well for his efforts, earning between $50 and $60 million a year. Plus, a unique agreement where he gets a cut of the revenue Apple makes from new subscriptions to its broadcasts of MLS games.
It is more of the Hollywood-type model.
Kenneth Shropshire is a professor emeritus at the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School of Business. He's an expert on the business of sports, and he says there is no question Messi will boost the league in the short term.
The whole question becomes, is this going to be sustained? And are you going to be able to hold on to fans that you might bring in, and sponsors and endorsers and others? And will there really be this next generation of athletes that have the option to play anywhere else in the world? And they say, no, I'm going to come to the MLS because I see the value that can be brought. And then there'll be who will be the next one to get the Apple type deal.
What happens on the field will be what matters most.
We are moments away from the 2023 MLS All-Star Game.
The All-Star Game, MLS's top players lost to Arsenal, who was playing without its top roster, by a lopsided score of 5-0.
Marquinhos, Havertz! A fifth for Arsenal. This matches the record for goals scored by an international club opponent against the MLS All-Stars.
At the same time, they lost in front of a sellout crowd of 20,000 fans. And an aside of where things are headed, outside the stadium after the game, vendors were hawking bootleg pink Miami jerseys. Messi is number 10 on the back. You're listening to All Things Considered from NPR News.
This is News 88.7.
I'm Eddie Robinson, and on this week's ICU, civil rights attorney Jeffrey Robinson, his thought-provoking Netflix documentary entitled Who We Are, Chronicle of Racism in America, offers up an interesting yet persuasive look at the history of our country.
It's loving America enough to say you've been acting like you've got a headache when what you've really got is a brain tumor.
We explore on the next ICU.
Later tonight at 9 o'clock here on News 88.7. Houston Public Media introduces Community Catalyst. Learn about the needs in our community through credible data from Understanding Houston. And meet Houston area nonprofits making a difference at communitycatalyst.org.
Houston Public Media is a service of the University of Houston and is supported with your gifts to the Houston Public Media Foundation. More information available online at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate.
I'm Janine Herbst with these headlines. Israel's prime minister is recovering in a hospital after having a pacemaker implanted overnight. This a day ahead of a vote in Parliament on Benjamin Netanyahu's plans to overhaul the country's judiciary. The 73-year-old says he plans to attend the vote in person. Ukraine says Russia struck critical infrastructure in the Black Sea area of Odessa overnight, damaging more than 20 historic buildings, including a landmark cathedral. One person is dead, nearly 24 are wounded. And at the weekend box office, Barbie took the top spot, bringing in an estimated $155 million in ticket sales. It's the biggest opening of the year and the top opening ever for a film directed by a woman. I'm Janine Herbst, NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from SmartMouth, committed to the prevention of bad breath for 24 hours with 2 rinses a day. SmartMouth mouthwash can be found nationwide at drugstores, grocery stores, and supercenters, or at smartmouth.com. And from Melville Charitable Trust, committed to ensuring all people have a safe, stable, and affordable home that allows them to thrive. Information about ways to prevent and solve homelessness is at melvilletrust.org. This is NPR.
From NPR News, this is All Things Considered. I'm Scott Detrow. Today, we want to introduce you to Kat. Kat is 14 and loves the show Sherlock Holmes, the one starring Benedict Cumberbatch, to be clear. And it's always called Utah home. Earlier this year, the state passed a ban on gender-affirming care for people under 18. It went into effect immediately in late January. And Kat, who's transgender, and Kat's family had to face one of the most difficult decisions of their lives, whether or not to leave Utah. Here's Kat's mom, Jen.
I've always said, living here in Utah, I feel like a salmon trying to swim upstream. And I'm really tired. My fins are very worn.
And we aren't using Jen or Kat's last name because they have concerns for their safety. But this is a story that we know is playing out all around the country. A lot of families are like Kat's. They're trying to make a big decision. And that decision isn't just about whether or not to leave. It's also about where to go. Often that's states like Minnesota, where elected officials have protected trans health care for both patients and providers. So we're going to talk more about this. We're going to go to Utah and Minnesota to do so. And I'm now joined by KUER's Sage Miller in Salt Lake